Mr. Chairman, I got a call from Andrew Harding a while ago saying we're looking for an economist to speak in this session in the racing industry. And I assured him I am not an economist, I'm an engineer. But I've spent over 25 to 30 years in the boardrooms of many major companies around the world thinking of how to improve performance. And it's that framework that I'm going to try and talk about today, because for the types of things that we're talking about this morning, or the examples we've seen from Hong Kong racing, you need actually a successful racing business model to allow you to have the discretion to understand your consumers, to invest in infrastructure, to invest in marketing, to develop the whole industry. Without that, it becomes, and many of you will resonate to this, and I used to be chairman of the New Zealand Racing Board, it becomes a constant struggle to stand still, an even greater challenge to improve, and fundamentally you sort of get into a loop where all you're doing is trying to continually improve, but not fundamentally hitting the sort of aspirations that we've heard from our previous speakers here in terms of community involvement, benefit, and the like. So I've picked three themes today that I'll run through briefly, and being with the Boston Consulting Group for many years, the basis of business strategy evolved from that organisation 50 years ago. And they've been relatively successful. I think over 50 years they've averaged about 12 to 15% growth per annum. Second thing to talk about, the regulatory environment. In other words, how you secure superior returns. And I think for the racing industry there are two dimensions, regulatory and the choice of business model. And then finally a couple of comments about the role of management. But I have picked a topic in between two people that will talk about the benefits to really, I believe, try and give people the pathway or some thoughts that allow those sort of aspirations where we want to take our industry to become reality. What's on the screen at the moment is the framework used fundamentally by the Boston Consulting Group, and it's been used in many places around the world and with most listed major organisations globally. In other words, that the performance of an organisation can be predicted by its comparative or competitive position, in other words, the regulatory environment in which it works and the business strategy it adopts, and at the end, your final fine-tuning is whether if management do a good job or a bad job. So let me start with the racing industry, and I broke it down, that comparative and competitive advantage, into two dimensions. And those little bubbles represent jurisdictions of racing where I could get the returns to owners, their size, and what have we. And if you look at going up the chart, and at the top, you've got some jurisdictions that I would say have very supportive regulatory environment. They generate high returns to owners, they generate a surplus, and they're able to develop business models that go beyond the pure survival dimension at times. In the middle, it's getting a little bit harder. There may be some supportive ideas, but there may be a bunch of activities that are not supportive or disadvantage the industry relative to either competitors in the gaming space or even those different organisations that support the industry. And then finally, down at the bottom, areas where there are significant limitations to what the industry can deliver, not through the fault of their own, but in the environment and the regulation and the competitive dynamics in which they operate. And here's the theory that we all aspire to. And this is taken from the economic and social contribution of horse racing in Europe. It was a report done at the end of 2009. And the words, I'm sure, resonate with most people in this room. All agreed forms of betting must compete on equal legal grounds as far as tax and horse race funding are concerned. As demonstrated in the study, regulation that discriminate betting operators that financially support horse racing can lead to a rapid decline of the industry. They make the same comment for sport, and if you look across the bottom, you'll see the European Parliament endorses those findings. So that's the ultimate objective, and it's not only just the different forms of wagering operators, it's the environment in which we operate and the rules versus, say, casinos, or the rules versus the latest developments in technology. Can we utilise them, can we not? So I would, and this is a relatively busy slide, but what it starts on the left-hand side and said, and we heard about it this morning, clearly there are organisations that are not affiliated, that are not partners of the racing organisation, that are, work behind interesting boundaries and fundamentally benefit from wagering without contributing to it. Those that then pay the basic fees are the next tiers up. Beyond that, you start to get to enhanced fees or sort of arrangements and agreements where there's support mutually. You can get up to the tote plus competition. Standard tote products get knocked around because of the tote plus competition. You can get margins from exotic tote products. And some of the levers that influence how competitive someone is on the left to the right, and we saw, for example, in David Attenborough's presentation this morning, the taxation and support differences, but you can look at, again, at casinos, you can look at how different organisations are allowed to use the internet, are allowed to use mobile phones, are allowed to trace down contributions from people offshore. The levers of taxation, channel access, product restrictions, is in the run betting allowable or not? Industry payments, are they being enforced? Are there cross-subsidisation rules that are unattractive? Are there regulatory guidelines that actually inhibit the growth of the industry? And I'm sure we can all think in our own jurisdictions of things that would enhance our ability to perform and deliver and enhance those that support racing through the wagering in particular to fundamentally be able to compete and contribute more. And so what I would encourage all organisations to do, and what you're seeing constantly, is you have to be completely diligent and completely obsessed with ensuring that there is an even playing field, or a playing field as even as you can possibly get it. And examples up here of those that are looking to develop point of consumption, licensing regimes. New Zealand is subject to no product fees and hence is suffering in some dimensions. Taxation levels we saw this morning are different across Australia, and I'm sure everyone in this room can think of other examples. But what you're doing when you're talking with governments like this, and I've been involved in tax reduction events, certainly in New Zealand, and other discussions offshore, it's not a grab from the health budget or something like that. It's allowing you an equal opportunity to compete and not have an inbuilt disadvantage that is being sought. And if you can get that, you then start to evolve further the model, the contribution to society, the contribution to the community, the discretionary events that occur. And just a simple example in New Zealand, the number of organisations that use the race facilities around the country for community events, for sporting events, for club meeting rooms is well into the hundreds. And it's those sort of benefits that if the industry starts to suffer, get taken away. If I then move to the competitor position, which is the business model, and there is one big difference, I believe, between racing and many other businesses. And I think this is captured in this following slide. And I've taken two sporting events, the NFL and the AFL, of being organisations that can be seen as extremely successful sporting competitions, that have grown, that have survived, that are extremely healthy. And what they have done is captured on that slide, and that's quotations from 20, near 30 years ago from who was the head of the NFL at that stage. Pete Rozelle ensured that the competition in the industry remained on the field and that the participants did not bid away all their economic wealth, their discretionary spend, trying to get better than someone else. And it has worked extremely and successfully well. Now, in the racing industry, we obviously compete on the track, we compete in the sales room, but we have to move from the competition that occurs within committees, that occurs within boards, that occurs within governance, and recognise that the competition is external, very much of it, to the racing industry, and not internal. There is no point spending your whole life arguing, does a deck chair go there or there, when in fact someone's walked into the room and whipped one of the deck chairs. Now, to me, people might say, gee, that's a bit harsh, but I do base it on a lot of experience in the governance area and with organisations who are obsessed with understanding the consumer, market share, efficiency, how do we win, how do we improve versus what we consider to be other competitors external to our business, or in your instance, our sport. And these two competitions have 4 basic rules. And the challenge is not to say this is what you should do here. The challenge is to say, are there things we can think about in racing that we can use going forward? First of all, they develop a premier competition supported by appropriate feeder or secondary competitions, and I'll explain on each one of these. They even up the competition to ensure exciting contests, financial stability, interest, participation, both on the wagering dimension and in the spectator, consumer, participant direction. They adapt the presentation to build audience, to build participation, to build wagering interest in our thing and loyalty. And finally, they develop governance structures that allow them to make the hard decisions. And in many cases in racing, to change, if you see, for example, the Hong Kong example this morning, they came in, they saw a declining, they changed fundamentally and have got it on a different platform. But it takes hard and strong governance and hard and strong decision making to move forward. On the development industry model that delivers adequate returns, this is the simple and dreaded return to owners slide with a bunch of jurisdictions. The ones at the top have discretionary income to invest, innovate and grow. In other words, they have dollars they can say, I don't have to put back into the prize pool. At the other end of the equation, you have to ask yourself, is that a sustainable model? Are we just constantly running to try and stand still in an area where we're not giving satisfactory returns to those that provide the product? And the interesting thing about it on the left-hand side, if you're there and you don't believe there is any regulatory relief, believe me, management will only move those points 1 or 2%. The best management in the world cannot compete against the economic laws of gravity of a competitor who has significant regulatory advantage. The second one, and probably the hardest one to draw the analogy to racing, is how do you actually even up the competition? How do you ensure that you get the best use of resources, you get financial stability, you get interest, you get full race fields, you get quality racing, you get quality stadia, etc. And within the sporting competitions, they have large central revenues, often from media, and player caps, etc., control player lists that stop the rich winning every second week, and the poor constantly at the bottom of the league. In racing, there are increasing models of centralisation of revenue and decision making. Hong Kong, for example, being a standout example. You've got to, if you take that to other jurisdictions, is there more to be done? Can we, at the same time as we do that, incentivise clubs and those that participate in the industry to also build and grow? Are you focusing the racing on a management number of tiered venues? Not only does it help wagering, but it allows a constant matching of resources to the product that's on display. I challenge a few organisations to think too at times, racing things. If I measured number of profitable owners, and I mean profitable is not quite the word an owner typically uses, but am I prepared to lose, am I prepared to be happy with a 70% return to owners? And if I set that there, do I actually start to reconstruct some of my industry and presentation? Do I get more people involved in terms of ownership? Because once you get ownership, you get this sort of 7 multiplier effect of participation in the industry. And funding allocation to the level of racing, obviously, but always look at the tilt and stakes money, the amount between the top and the bottom, and say, have I got this right? Am I getting the right signals? Am I getting the right behaviour I'm looking for my industry? Am I getting growth in my industry? We've heard a lot at this conference, especially this morning, about adapting the presentation of the sport to build attendance, midweek at Happy Valley, the carnivals we see around. But it's this obsession with understanding in the challenged times that our consumers face. They've got demands to go shopping, they've got home mortgages, they've got demands to watch the best sport in the world on television at any one particular time. Are we putting our products, our wagering products, are we using our technology, our facilities to the different customer segments, particularly the young, and building them? And I must admit that little racing app this morning was one of the smartest things I've seen for years in engaging the younger person to the industry, to understand it, to enjoy it, and to participate in it. We've heard about the large coordinated and comprehensive marketing presentations, but even to do a good job there, you need some discretionary spend to tell people about it, to have them, when they turn up on course, that the experience matches the brand promise. And obviously leveraging the new media, the telecast, to achieve optimal attractiveness to fans, complement wagering is a constant challenge to us. And if anyone was to say, if you went back 8 or 10 years and said, what will media be looking like today? I'm not sure everyone would have got it right. And if you think 10 years in advance, it's going to be a fair challenge, but how do we utilize that? But it really is thinking, I build the attendance of the audience. And if you take the AFL, for example, in Sydney, where they've developed and expanded the competition, all their recruitment and development officers were women, because they'd worked out that between the age of 8 and 12, when many people decide what sport they'll participate in or what sport they will follow, they're more influenced by their mothers. So, it's just really understanding the customer segments and developing it. And the AFL have successfully developed competitions in Sydney. And finally, governance. There's a lot, particularly if you're at the bottom end of that chart, there is a lot of tension in terms of how do we make decisions? Am I coming into the room wearing a hat that is for the good of the industry, for the good of what I'm trying to do, or am I coming into the room with a hat saying, can I get more funds for my organisation? And I know it's going to be at the expense of that pocket over there, but what have we? I would encourage, and obviously the integrated models that you see in a jurisdiction like Hong Kong and Singapore don't have this issue. They are fully integrated. They have a board that is responsible for the lot. In the more fragmented models, have we got the right balance between knowledge, industry representation, and skills and experience that allow you to make maybe the 5 and 7 year decisions, which are tough, are risky, and live by them. I won't go in detail, it'll no doubt be in your handout, but if you look at just the 87 to 2006 AFL, we'd all be jealous. If you go from 2006 to 2013, it's virtually doubled again. So let me just summarise what I believe. We all would like the aspiration of enhanced community to grow the industry, to participate more and more with the new generations and develop the interest and the support for racing. I would challenge you to think of it three ways. Number one, have I got enough resources constantly seeking to level the playing field to ensure I have a fair chance and those that support me have a fair chance? On terms of comparative advantage, have I got a business competitive advantage? Have I got the right strategy that is going to take me further? Am I challenging myself enough? Am I looking at maybe some of these examples you see offshore and adapting them to the product I have? And then finally, the impact of management. If they can be externally focused to beat the competition and not spending a lot of their life internally focused, wrestling with industry issues, I think you'll get a better outcome. Thank you.